So what if I told you there's a kind of money that was literally born on the internet? Something you could send to anyone, anywhere in the world, without needing a bank's permission slip. That right there is the huge promise of Bitcoin. But how does it actually work under the hood? Well, let's dive in and find out. Okay, but that whole idea hinges on solving this one massive puzzle. Think about it. You can copy a photo, an MP3 file, a document, a million times over, right? So how on earth do you create a digital coin that someone can't just, copy and paste? That's the core problem, this challenge of creating digital scarcity. And it's exactly what Bitcoin was built to solve. All right, so first up, let's really dig into the problem of digital money. Because, it's a lot trickier than you might think. This is really the heart of it all. Digital stuff is just super easy to copy, and that creates what's called the double spend problem. I mean, if you could just copy a digital coin, what's to stop you from spending that same coin at 2, 3, 10 different places? The whole system would just fall apart, right? It wouldn't work. And this is exactly why Bitcoin was such a massive breakthrough. For decades, the only way anyone thought you could solve this double spend thing was to have a middleman, like a bank, keeping track of everything on a central ledger. Bitcoin was the first to come along and say, hey, what if we could do this without any central authority at all? So how did they pull it off? The answer lies in a technology you've probably heard thrown around a lot, the blockchain. Let's break down what that really means. Okay, let's cut through all the technical jargon for a second. The absolute best way to think about the blockchain is just as a giant global spreadsheet. Seriously, it's a public ledger that's shared across thousands of computers, and it keeps a record of every single Bitcoin transaction that has ever happened. But here's the magic part. Because it's shared everywhere, no single person, no company, no government, nobody is in charge. So how does this giant spreadsheet get updated? Well, new transactions get grouped together into what's called a block. Then that new block gets cryptographically locked onto the previous block, forming a chain. Block after block after block. And that's it. That's the blockchain. This structure is what creates a permanent, unchangeable history of everything that's ever happened. Okay, but wait a minute. That raises a pretty big question, doesn't it? If you've got thousands of computers all over the world, each with a copy of this spreadsheet, and there's no boss, how do they all agree on which transactions are legit? What stops someone from trying to cheat the system? Well, the answer is a process called mining. And no, we're not talking about pickaxes and shovels. A better way to think about it is like a massive worldwide competition. All these specialized computers are racing against each other, trying to be the first to solve an incredibly complex math puzzle. And the winner, they get the right to add the next block of transactions to the chain. And this gets to the real reason mining is so important. A lot of people think it's just about creating new Bitcoin, but that's only part of the story. The real job of mining is to secure the entire network. This whole process, called proof of work, makes it ridiculously expensive and difficult for anyone to go back and change the history. It's basically the network security system. Okay, so we've got this secure, decentralized ledger. We get it. But what does it actually mean for you to own Bitcoin? It's probably not what you're thinking. See, you don't really hold Bitcoin like you hold cash in your wallet, and there isn't some Bitcoin files sitting on your computer. Ownership isn't about having a thing, it's about having control. And what you control is a secret piece of information, a password on steroids, called a private key. This key is the one and only thing that proves you own the Bitcoin and gives you the power to spend it. The best analogy I've heard is this. Think of your public address like your email address. It's totally safe to give out to people so they can send you stuff. In this case, Bitcoin. But your private key, that's like your email password. You guard it with your life, you never share it. Because if someone else gets it, they get access to everything. They can spend your Bitcoin. And this all leads to probably the most famous saying in the entire crypto world. Not your keys, not your coins. What that means is simple. If you're letting some company or exchange hold on to your private keys for you, you don't really own your Bitcoin. You're just trusting them to give it back. True sovereign ownership means that you and only you are in control of that secret key. It's incredibly empowering, but yeah, it's also a massive responsibility. All right, so now that we've got a handle on the how, let's talk about the why. What makes Bitcoin so different from everything that came before it? What are its truly unique features? This number right here. This might be the most important number in all of Bitcoin, 21 million. Unlike government-issued currencies that can basically be printed forever, Bitcoin has an absolute final limit. There will never be more than 21 million Bitcoin. And this isn't just some company policy. It's hard-coded into the system. It's enforced by a mechanism that cuts the new supply in half about every 4 years, which means Bitcoin just gets harder and harder to come by over time. And that absolute, predictable scarcity, that's why you always hear people call Bitcoin digital gold. The logic is pretty simple. Just like gold, you can't just create more of it out of thin air. It's hard to get, and there's a limited supply. That predictable, unchangeable supply is what draws in people who are looking for something that can hold its value over the long term, something that can't be devalued by endless money printing.
But let's be real, Bitcoin is not perfect. It's a system built on trade-offs. The very things that are its greatest strengths also create some of its biggest challenges. For instance, being decentralized means its price can be incredibly volatile, which makes it pretty risky. And that idea of being your own bank? It's powerful, sure, but if you lose your private key, your money is just gone forever. And then there's the energy debate. The proof of work that makes it so secure uses a ton of electricity, and that's a huge point of controversy. You really have to look at both sides of the coin here.
So at the end of the day, Bitcoin is so much more than just a piece of technology. It's really a massive, ongoing global experiment. And it forces us to ask a really fundamental question. Is a money system based on math and fixed, predictable rules a better future than one that relies on the decisions of human institutions? Honestly, that's the big question that we're all still trying to figure out.